And DJ Hendricks has a few comments now.
Good morning. My presentation provides some information from a follow-up survey of a sample of employers who had contacted the Job Accommodation Network to obtain accommodation information. And I realize that there may be some of you in the audience today who aren't familiar with the Job Accommodation Network, also known as JAN. So if I mention JAN, I'm not talking about a mysterious woman. But there are some materials on the table that are over to your far left if you would like to pick those up following the presentations. There we go. The Job Accommodation Network is funded by the U.S. Department of Labor, specifically the Office of Disability Employment Policy. These analyses were supported by NIDR. The surveys themselves were conducted by the Law, Health Policy, and Disability Center at the University of Iowa, and we owe many thanks to Dr. Peter Blank, James Schmeling, and Helen Schartz of that center. During these surveys, 1,182 employers were surveyed. This occurred approximately 6 to 8 weeks after they had contacted JAN in order to obtain accommodation information for an individual who had a disability in their workplace. We gave them this waiting period to allow the company to implement an accommodation, or at least to decide what it was they would like to do. Out of those 1,182 employers, 72, or 6.1%, reported that they had considered using an interpreter, a reader, a job coach, or a personal assistant after having talked with the JAN consultant. And essentially this just means that during the conversation with the consultant at JAN, they had talked about how to implement a PAS solution. Employers who considered using PAS were much more likely to be calling about an individual in the job application stage as compared to employers who were considering other types of accommodations. In the PAS employers, only 7.5% were in the non-PAS employers, only 7.5% were calling about an applicant, and this is compared to 26.6% in the PAS cases, and this was significantly different. The most frequent type of disability that was involved in the PAS cases was sensory impairments at 43%. This could be further broken down into individuals who were deaf or hard of hearing at 27%, visual impairment at 13%, and other sensory impairments at 3%. The remaining accommodations involve motor impairments at 25% and neurological functioning at 20%, other disabilities accounting for the remaining 12%. As you can see here, the individuals in the PAS cases were much more likely to have either no high school diploma or to have at least some college than were the individuals in the other accommodation types. And so this puts them at basically both extremes of the educational scale. When we asked the employer, did the individual have a substantial limitation in a life area other than work, I'd say it's not too surprising, but the employers in the PAS cases much more frequently believed that the individual was substantially limited as compared to the employers in the non-PAS cases. As you can see here, it was 76.2% of the PAS cases who said yes, the individual did have a substantial limitation in a life area other than work. When we asked the same question about the life area of work, again, we found that a much higher percentage of the employers in the PAS cases said that the individual did indeed have a substantial limitation. 77% of the employers in the PAS cases said yes, as compared to 61.7% in the non-PAS cases. We also asked the employers to give an indication as to their perception of the individual's degree of limitation. When we look here at the work activities limitations, what we find is that the individuals in the PAS cases were viewed as, again, being significantly more limited in the types and amount of work that they were able to perform as compared to the individuals in the non-PAS cases. Even with an accommodation in place, the employer said that the individual was still significantly more limited in the degree type of work that they could do. Here you see we've compared the status of the accommodation at the time we did the follow-up. In the PAS cases, the employer had already implemented or was in the process of implementing a PAS accommodation 58.2% of the time, and that's pretty high. In another 28.4% of the cases, the decision was pending. They were still in the decision-making process. Only 13.4% at the time that the call was made had decided to reject that possibility as an accommodation. And we compared that here to two other very, very frequent types of accommodations: the use of a product or piece of equipment and changes to work schedule. And so you can see it's about at the same rate of application here. In comparison here, a change in degree of limitation with work accommodation. The accommodations in the PAS cases were exactly the same level of success, if you will. The employer thought that these accommodations were just as effective in terms of accommodating the individual. They started out a little more severely limited, so they ended up still, even with accommodation, a little more limited. In terms of future research, what we're looking at here, our data collection is completed in this study, but we have a lot more analyses that can be done. One of the big areas that we really want to take a good look at are the costs and benefits that are associated with PAS when you compare those with other types of accommodations, and also the types of businesses that are involved in this. But we still have an awful lot of data analyses that we can be doing in this and getting some answers and hopefully some good promising practices out of that. Thank you.